This week on the Sports Initiative podcast, I sit down with Houston Astros batting coach Andrew Cresci. He discusses some of the key principles to batting and how players can develop this over time, the work he does around talent identification and how this helps him prepare for new players into the building, as well as some of his key coaching philosophies. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, please make sure you share it with friends and family. I hope you enjoy. Right, Andrew, nice to have I would say that's probably one of the longest catch-ups I've had prior to a thing, but discussed loads of good bits already, so I'm pumped for the conversation. Before we get started, how are things your end? Are you all good?
Yeah, just got all the fun contract off season stuff out of the way. Now I get to enjoy a little bit of time off before we got to go back next year. So now it's all good.
We always know as well that off seasons aren't really off seasons if you work in sport. You maybe get 2 weeks, and then before you know it, you're getting bored and worrying about how to work with the players and stuff. So I'll let you enjoy the next couple of weeks, and then I'm sure you'll be itching to get raring and going again. But for people that maybe don't know you, haven't come across you, etc., do you just want to give us a bit of an oversight of who you are and what you do?
My name is Andrew Cresci. I am a minor league hitting coach at the Houston Astros. Yeah, no, I've been at the complex level down here. Worked in affiliate baseball for a little bit. Was over at Driveline previously, coached in college. So bounced around. Played over in Italy for a short stint, which was a really fun experience. But yeah, that kind of caps it off. Been in pro ball for this will be my third year.
Awesome. So, for people that maybe don't have an extensive knowledge or background of baseball, what are, I guess, the roles of a hitting coach? What would your expectation be? What are you looking to do? How are you looking to develop the players?
I think for me, like, going and focusing on solely hitting, kind of the evaluation process of it. I think depending on the level, obviously down here at the complex level, you have some of the younger players, and some of these guys are phenomenally talented, but very, very young. So kind of going through, having that evaluation period. We have extended spring training, which for me is almost like an extended off-season program that I get to spend time with these guys before like the games kind of officially count. Even though it all counts, but getting them ready, having that extra cushion, which is awesome for development. But it's heavy development focused for me for the most part, especially being at the minor league level, getting these guys ready to go and potentially trying to vault them into affiliate baseball, and then ultimately, if the stars align, the things they do work out, the work they put in, the talent level is enough, the results are there, they get to the big league level.
Yeah, listen, I think that I've seen enough books on the Premier League with the people that progress through to Premier League. There's recent statistics that come out that said how unlikely that is, and I imagine baseball is very, very similar on that front.
Yeah, it's like we were saying before. Like I think that is as different as the two sports are, and the different as the two systems are. The minor leagues and the academy system. The idea that these guys are being developed and pushed up. But also like, the hit and miss rate, I'm sure on players in the Premier League is probably just as high. Unfortunately they're starting to mess with like the player cap here. So like they moved it down a little bit. I think it's like 140 we're allowed to have stateside. So, and they also reorganized the minor leagues a couple of years ago. So a couple less opportunities for guys professionally, which is unfortunate, but there's a lot of talent. And it kind of shows that like how competitive and hard it is to climb up those ranks. It's not like the other sports here where generally you might have like a one team underneath them, or like with football, like you go into the draft and these guys are added to the roster and they, you're the practice squad or you play, or you're not in professional football at all, or American football. But like for baseball and the Premier League, you have those kind of like lower tier teams where these guys are going to go kind of up the chain.
Yeah, I guess from a talent ID perspective, and you're saying about the evaluation process, how does that look like in baseball? Because obviously in the UK, you have kind of some of your big hitters that, by the nature of our academy system, they can go out and buy any players they want, particularly after Brexit in the UK, where you can't buy international players below 18-ish, something like that. It then meant your teams like Man City's, Chelsea's, etc., are basically going to go to clubs in the UK and go, right, who are the best players? We're going to try and buy them. Um, but majority of the time, they will look to fit within an idea or a brand or a way of playing. What does the evaluation process look like in the States? Is it similar in terms of you guys have what you want from a Houston hitter, or is it very much actually we're going to go really broad and it's going to be by a batter by batter case?
Well, kind of like similar to there, at least there's like a discrepancy in the US players versus the international players. So for players in the United States, guys can get picked up via, free agency. If they're really young, obviously they have to go into the draft. They could sign as undrafted free agents. That is going to happen with guys that are after high school. And then I think it's after like your third year of college or something like that, you can declare for the draft. And then internationally, you have in order to curb like kind of that situation, like where just like that one team spends and just buys all the players, like they have like a pool of money that you can spend, international signing pool. So that doesn't happen. In terms of like the evaluation process, it's pretty much like every team is going to have their own, kind of similar to the Premier League. Like everybody has their own scouting department. Everybody has those things that they look for in what they may identify, whether it's like they're extremely technically proficient at a young age, whether they have really high like output ceiling, whatever it may be that organization is looking at. The scouting department is going to scout these guys up. In baseball, the Latin kids are getting signed at 16 years old. Coming, and even before that, those agreements that take place, and then they get them in there. But they're going off to the academies in the DR, and they get developed before they come stateside and are kind of put into the systems in the United States. And then the high school national players and the college players that are drafted, draft happens in July now. And those guys, it's the same deal. Like you also have an allotment pool of money that you can spend during the draft. So again, this way you can't just go out there and just throw money at everything. But even then, like I'm sure, like how many players are former Chelsea Academy guys that are now in the Premier League for other teams? I mean, it somehow evens its way out.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because we get it quite a lot where players will leave one environment and then end up going somewhere else and thriving. Like it's really, really common practice. Like the Chelsea one's a really interesting example at the moment because they probably got rid of quite a lot of academy players and have gone all in via Todd Bowley to try and get, like, I think they've spent £1 billion in the last 3 transfer windows or something like that. And they've gone after a certain profile of player, which is youngish, but they, similar to what you said you're not able to do in baseball, they're kind of doing, which is they're going, right, I'm going to buy this player, this player, this player, this player. We're going to hope that a few of them hit, and if we do, we'll be in a really good spot. So it's an interesting strategy. Unfortunately, it looks like it might work, having beaten Tottenham the other night, and I'm a Spurs fan, so I could have done without that. But it's a really interesting way of working. I think one of the things they have found difficult, and it'd be interesting to see how baseball copes with this, is the differentiation between competition levels when you're scouting abroad. So, if you're going to go and scout in the Ukraine, for example, that's very different to what, the English Premier League looks like. Or if you're going to go and scout in Spain or Australia, all of these environments and leagues are very different in terms of standard and whatnot, which often means an average player, when they come across, can look like an absolute world beater when they're in their native environment. Is that something that you guys get quite a lot? If you're going to like Venezuela and you're seeing a player there that you're looking to evaluate, where all of a sudden he's hitting every, like, a home run every single game, but then when he comes across to you, actually there's some flaws that American pitchers are able to give him some challenges with. Is that something that happens quite a lot, or have you got a process to be able to get you through that?
No, I think in that regard, like, and that speaks to how difficult these sports are and how it like progresses level to level. and you're scaling kind of the idea of like, all right, what is the competition level that they're facing now? Are they just physically, especially when you're scouting guys that are that young, are they just physically mature enough that they're dominating based off of their current physical development? Are they, technically proficient at that young of an age where they have that advantage, but that doesn't carry over, like if they, as everyone else ages and catches up to them. I think that's probably the question that most scouting departments deal with. Houston does a phenomenal job of scouting and player development, and that's why they've been able to kind of have the sustained success they've had in terms of playoff runs and reaching the championship series, at least before even the World Series. The success they've had, I think, we like to talk about all the time. Like, I think it's there's a graphic that floats around social media all the time that kind of comes out every year come playoff time that shows the homegrown talent and development of every single organization. Houston has been at the top for like the last several years. So I think, hopefully I'm answering your question, because I know that alarm went off when you were talking. But I think like you're trying to project a lot of these guys, just similar to the kids that you do in the academy. Like, you're trying to find those things that you can project out, and hopefully identify. It depends on the team strategy. I mean, like, you have teams like the Yankees that, or the Padres this past season, are willing to, because of that failure rate, go out and just get the top guy in the international signing pool and just throw all of their money at that one guy. And then there are teams like the Houston Astros that will, they spread that money out. Like, you have a couple big money guys, but you're not taking that whole, $5-6 million allotment, whatever it may be, and just spending it on one player. The Yankees did that a few years ago with Jason Dominguez, who reached the big leagues this year, had a really awesome debut. I think he hit like 4 home runs in the first week and a half he was in the big leagues. His first game was against the Astros. He hit a home run a minute, but he was a guy that was like really, really hyped up. Phenomenally talented, and they just kind of threw the bag at him. They got him, and it's worked out so far. He ended up tearing a ligament in his elbow when he was throwing, so he'll be out up until like, I think, halfway of next year. But he's a guy that looks like he's going to have all the success in the world. But again, like, I think that's more of a testament to their development as well, because you can get the most talented 16-year-old in the world, but what's he going to look like in 4 years? When he's a grown man. So I'm sure that's.
Would you say that's environmental specific? So would you say that certain clubs look for certain profiles of player, or would you say that invariably it's like, we're going to try and get the best player and hope that they flourish in our environment?
I think that kind of similar to the Premier League. I think it's probably org to org. Like, every organization is going to have their scouting department and their GM and the powers that be that are going to make those decisions. I think each of them have an idea of what contributes to success. Now, some of them might share those same values, some don't. Some might utilize different tech, some don't. Like, I think it all depends on who's running the show and what their system of development is. Because obviously, like, if everybody had the exact same thing, all the exact same players would be signed. But there's always those consensus guys that everybody agrees, all right, this kid is fantastic, this kid's phenomenal. But how often do those kids pan out? And I don't think that's necessarily a shot at the process. It's hard to project out at a kid. And in baseball, we're doing it, at like, on the international end, if you're looking at guys, in their 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, that's tough. If you're a Premier League team and you're signing a 7-year-old, like, I'm sure that's like, even, I mean, come on, that's you're looking at over a decade before they're 17, 18 years old, and that's when they're considered a legal adult. So I mean, that's a kind of an interesting thing where, like, I guess from your experience, to kind of throw that over to you, like, what do you see in that regard? Like, is the miss rate just absolutely insane at that level?
Yeah, in short, it's madness. Like the terminology. Well, I speak quite a lot to parents and stuff, and Jamie Carragher actually put a really good clip out on social media a few years ago, and his son actually plays for Liverpool,
Yep.
or did at the time, and he said, I basically don't ever say that he's going to play for a Liverpool football club. he said it's incredibly unlikely that he will. He goes, whilst he's in the academy, I'll support him, I'll challenge him, whatnot. But I've never ever thought that he would play for Liverpool Football Club. What I see it as is a private school education at football where he's going to get some amazing coaches, he's going to get some amazing experience, and will enjoy it for as long as he's there for, rather than focusing on the end goal. So for me, that's one thing I'll say to parents is actually it's incredibly unlikely that someone at 7 is going to go all the way through the pathway. Equally, it's going to be incredibly unlikely someone at 12 in baseball is going to go all the way through the pathway and make it. But what you can do is focus on how are they going to develop, what skills are they learning for baseball and in life, and um, you know it gives them really good life experiences that hopefully will set them up along the way. So yeah, the miss rate in football is particularly high. So I think the more that we can focus on actually just having positive experiences in a sport that they love doing is far more beneficial. Because for some of them, under 13s might be the best baseball season of their life. That like be in reality that might be the height of their achievement, that they have a really good year, and you kind of ride with that and let them experience all those positive things. So yeah, that's kind of the shift that I have. There'll be others out there that are listening in academy football that disagree, going no, we should be striving all we do and telling parents to do all they can to get them to the very top. But that's, I guess, my perception of it, because I think just the success rate of it is so small. As you said, like it's 10 years before they are even close to being anywhere near men's football. So think about all the things that happen in your life in 10 years. It's yeah, such a period of change.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago, you tell me I'm a hitting coach with the Houston Astros in Pro Bowl, I'd kind of laugh at you. But like, yeah, 10 years, what was I doing 10 years ago? Like, I hadn't even at that point, like, I had quit my job and moved to Italy to go get a degree in archaeology because I was annoyed with kind of the things I was doing. I was working in finance. I was coaching a little bit on the side, and 10 years is a long time. But that's the problem here, and it's the issue with youth development here is that I'm sure that they have this in Europe as well, like the private academies, the private club teams, and just the level of just the extreme level that they take these things. Like in the States, huge amount of money in these private travel teams. 10U, 11U, 12U, like circuit teams that are traveling around to these like national tournaments. And when in reality, like you're 10 years old, like the development part of them just having fun is like that is paramount. Like nobody is going out and signing a 10-year-old. Nobody's going out and signing an 11-year-old. Like, and the system in the United States is a little broken in that regard. And obviously I'm not a parent, but I saw how, not to an extreme degree, but your parents want you to succeed. They want you to they think the world of you, and they think you're always going to be like the best or whatever. And like, some parents are a little bit more honest with their kids and expectations, but I think that gets sold to a lot of parents really early, is they're like, oh, your kid's phenomenal and you're going to do this and this and it's, in reality, it's extremely hard. And nobody wants to tell a kid like, okay, you want to be a professional soccer player, you want to be a professional baseball player, you're never going to do that. But like, I think the priorities of those systems, like you were saying, like have to be kind of shifted a little bit, and not tell a 7-year-old that like, and his parents, oh, this kid's going to play for Liverpool. And it's like, a lot can happen in a decade, man. Like, kid could just stop growing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 5'8". So, I mean, like,
as you said, there's so many factors into it that actually, if you do turn around and say, "Oh yeah, you're definitely gonna make it," I think that it's selling false hope. And I guess one of the differences we're beginning to see it come into the UK, but it hadn't previously, is these pay to play models in terms of academies and stuff. Some academies, I'm not going to tarnish everyone, but some, they have a vested interest to tell you how good your son or daughter is, because you're paying them, and the better that you make them feel and the better you feel like there's chances, the more money they're going to make. So it's kind of like you need to find the good ones where they have the interest of the children at heart. to allow them to progress rather than someone just saying to you, oh, how amazing they are. And then, obviously just wanting some more dollars in the back pocket, which is a challenge that I think is going to come. One thing I think this topic of conversation is really interesting for, and I guess you can speak about it predominantly at the top end for where you are now, but it's probably consistent for those who listening along the pathway, is what would you say some of the key characteristics of a good hitter are? So if I was to say to you now, if you're watching the top level or those that are having most success in minor leagues, what would you say some of the key characteristics that make them good at hitting are?
Um, I think if you look at the like the younger prospects or just like in general who's having the most success, like I think you kind of look at and there's different ways to succeed, right? Like not every player is exactly the same, because if there's one way to do it, everyone would do it. There'd be one particular player everybody would look for. There are skills that scale though, and like obviously you're looking at on the bat speed, exit velocity, so the velocity of the ball coming off the bat, how hard you hit it. That output ceiling is going to be a huge indicator of success in terms of margin for error. Your ability to put the bat on the ball, your bat to ball skills, what kind of contact you making, like how flush are you hitting the ball on a consistent basis, your ability to put the bat on the ball, and then kind of your decision making process of what you're choosing to swing at, like the value of the pitches you're choosing to swing at. Obviously in baseball, kind of slightly similar to cricket in the sense where you have the strike zone, the wickets, but like with the fact that you're getting that 3 strikes to work with, the fact that you have the 4 misses of a ball results in a walk and you get on first base. Looking at those skills, and then also just like the physical development as well. Like I was saying before, I'm 5'8". Like you get a guy that like Yordan Alvarez for the Houston Astros, that guy's enormous. Like you look at a guy in terms of physically how they're developing, and how much of a window that allows them for that output ceiling as well. And again, like it's more so bigger than just simply, oh, that guy's huge, he can hit. Because for every, again, if you look at the 2 probably biggest outliers in baseball in terms of like body composition and size, you have like Aaron Judge with the New York Yankees, who's like borderline like 7 feet tall. And then you have Jose Altuve with the Houston Astros, who's like my man's like 5'5" or something like that, 5'6", but he is a phenomenal hitter. He has a huge level of output, but he leverages that in different ways. So I think it depends, but like looking at those kind of 3 skill specific categories, and then also just like what kind of force output do you have, those are going to be indicative of potential success. Now you can have all the things in the world if you can't get them all to work in tandem. I mean, generally, if you look at those 3 things we talked about, like you kind of need 2 of them. It's really tough to get away with just one. You have a huge output ceiling, but you make horrible decisions and you can't hit the ball. If you can hit the ball, but you make horrible decisions, and if you do hit it, it doesn't go anywhere. Like, so I think that'd probably be for me, like how you go about judging success in terms of who could potentially be there.
And how measurable are those things? So you look at, obviously, we discussed the development pathway. One thing we actually caught up off air about was like the maturation status of people coming through the pathway. You might have one 13-year-old that looks like me, who's got a massive beard and is 6'2", and then you've got another that hasn't even reached puberty yet, and might be challenging when they go through puberty in terms of hand-to-eye coordination or force output or velocity, speed, and stuff. So how measurable are those things, number one? And then 2, in terms of like bat speed and velocity of exit and whatnot, how reliable is the data you get from a talent ID perspective, from like I guess a US high school compared to maybe a Dominican Republic high school compared to an international school over in Japan? Is it comparable, or is that like, again, one of the minefields you have in talent ID in terms of that type of information that's coming across?
I mean, to tackle the first part about that, I think it depends. There's like a huge scale in those guys. I mean, we have a excuse me, we have a couple high school draft picks this past year that I kind of get on their case because they look so young, and I call them children. And then I also had like a guy who played for me not last season, the season before, and he's like 21 years old, but he kind of has a beard, and I joke all the time that he looks like he's 35. So I'm like, you get the varying like ranges of guys in their development. But the thing that the Houston Astros do very well in terms of the player development aspect, especially with the strength and conditioning, is they get the most out of these kids, and the turnaround and development on the skill end, development on the strength end, the nutrition end, like it's phenomenal. So these kids not necessarily always mature physically quickly, because like that's not always up to the anyone else, but kind of life. But getting these guys on the right track, they do phenomenally well, which speaks to a lot of the success that they have. In terms of like measuring those things, and that's the nice thing about baseball, for good and bad, is you can measure everything. Like now the accuracy of that data depends on what you're using to measure it. Bat speed, there's bat sensors, in professional baseball. Now they have Hawkeye, so all of the professional fields are covered in terms of collecting basically every piece of information that they can. Swing decisions, you can, every team has their own way to judge that. There's also public resources that do it in a slightly different fashion. Contact skills, 1,000,001 different metrics to do that. So like all of these things are collectible, but kind of like we were talking about before, like it depends on the environment that you're having it in. The baseball is such a reactive thing. It's why like you can go out and draft a pitcher from a Division 3-2 school if they have the shapes and the velocity and the things that you believe can scale, versus like a lot of those like lower level hitters from when the competition's really low, like they're not going to get those looks because the competition which they're facing and reacting to is not at a high level. As a hitter, I'm facing what is being thrown to me. Like I'm not really in all control of what is happening. So it depends on the competition level and things like that, but all those things are definitely collectible.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting dynamic around that, because, as you said, like the varying levels of data, and football, it has come in more and more. We're seeing Brighton in the Premier League. I think their owner or someone in there higher up in their club did a lot around betting and understanding the
Yeah.
scale
The
around that.
XG model.
Yeah, well, you've got a little bit around the XG model, but also people like Salcido and stuff. They've gone and found out in Colombia and have some way got some statistics on him to suggest that he's gone good. That's why they went from Basuma to Salcido, who both have obviously subsequently left. So I
Yeah.
think analytics from a football perspective are becoming more and more interesting. The bit that's, I guess, more interesting for me is how, as a coach, you use them, because you've got all this data that you can work from, and you could go, okay, I'm going to go down a completely data driven model, but actually that probably doesn't work for players in real life. But also from a player development perspective, you actually probably need them to have more skills than just what data is flashing out. And one of the best lines I had from this is actually a guy called Ben Bartlett, who works for the Houston Dynamos. So over your end, he's an English guy who's gone out there, and he says that his work is data guided, which I thought is a really nice terminology, in terms of he takes data in consideration, and then that guides what his practice and stuff looks like. And that might be like repetitions of particular shots, or when we're doing session designs about getting players into certain areas of the field that are replicable, to where they're going to score goals, or where goals are created, or types of set pieces, and how that then leads to more chances over a period. From your guys' perspective, how does looking at that data help you from a like a player development piece? So if you've got all these new draftees coming in, or you're in the off season now, I'm assuming you're going to get to a point in the off season and go, right, this is probably a collection of players that we think we're going to have in the building, unless someone trades them or someone comes in. What type of process would you be doing to look through it? And then what would you, from a personal perspective, be going, right, I'm going to try and work on him with his pitch IQ. Here's some strategies I'm going to help him do that. Well, yeah, from a personal perspective, what does that look like for you?
I mean, I think I really like that, like the data guided, because I think that's a more accurate description of it. And I think that's what gets lost in the and like we were talking about before, the kind of fight of like the kind of data driven guided coaching strategy versus like that more traditional where they both kind of like butt heads with the other because the other is wrong because X, Y, and Z. In reality, you're measuring something, and you can measure whatever you want. The idea is, are you measuring the right things, and how are you leveraging that data? When we have guys come in, just like every other org, like if you're collecting data on guys, whether you're in the scouting department, player development department, or just any kind of performance improving position, like you have to know where you are, because you have to know where you're going. And then in terms of like the data you're collecting, are the things that you're doing working? And the only way to know that is to measure your results, to make sure that like, okay, like you're building validity and like, all right, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, X and Y works, Z doesn't. We're not getting the results that we need. There's no improvement there. And like, so we know we're not wasting training economy doing that. Because not everything is going to work with certain guys. So again, like if there was one way to do anything, you would just shove everybody into the exact same model. Now there are things that like we talked about, skills at scale. Like, all right, I know that, building a guy's bat speed up is going to raise his ceiling. We want to live in that 80, 90% window of intent, because at 100%, we're sacrificing way too much accuracy with the bat. So, okay, like how can I push that ceiling as high as I can so that 80 to 90% threshold we're going to sit at is where we live. Now, how am I going to relay that information and build that program around this specific athlete versus this specific athlete in order to achieve that? And I think that's the part of it that, is going to get the most bang for your buck. Because anyone can measure anything, but how are you implementing that data? And I think the guy from the Houston Dynamo, like you're saying, like, I think it's probably the best way to put it. Especially like the time that I spent at Driveline before coming to the Astros, like data-driven development, not necessarily like, all right, I'm just staring at these numbers and then I'm solely going off of, bucket this, bucket that, like you are going to do this exact thing. It's like, no, because some things do not work. People move differently, guys learn differently. The communication part of it, like we talked about before, like, you could be the greatest player in the world, but if you can't communicate this information to players, and make it digestible, it doesn't matter. And I think that's something that, for me in particular, like I try to educate the players as much as I can in terms of what these metrics mean, why they're beneficial, why we're doing anything. And I think that comes to the coaching thing that, I think you can agree with as well, is that like, I tell players all the time, like, if you come up to me and you have questions, you whatever, ask why on everything. I don't care, because if I can't provide you with an answer, we shouldn't be doing it, especially at like the professional level. Like I'm not going to lie to you. It's your career. Like, so if you don't like something, ask me why.
No, that makes sense. So I'm going to give you a bit of a hypothetical here. So apologies because I haven't given you this in advance. So it might take a little bit of scrambling to figure it out. But say, for example, you've seen via the data that you've got a newish intake, someone who's come out of college, third year, so they're coming into your minor league program, and you see that they struggle with off-speed pitches, both inside and outside of the plate. Which I should more so from a like picking it point of view, in terms of they're not able to see it and swing at it when they shouldn't be swinging at it because it's not a particularly strong area for them. How
Yep.
would you go around creating a program to help them develop that area when they're with you? Because obviously it's something that other minor league teams, and if they do make it that far, major league teams are going to look to exploit because it's a weakness that everyone is aware of. Yeah, what would you do from a personal perspective? How would you look to develop that with the player? What type of programs would you put in place? What type of processes would you do to try and help them develop that?
I mean, I think like anything, like you're identifying that, all right, you've identified with the data that you have that like there is an issue. Like this guy has a lot of trouble hitting breaking balls, like you're saying. it's going to depend on the individual, because you're looking through and you're like, all right, well, why do they not have success? Is it a movement issue? Is it an approach issue? In terms of the movement side, like, do they not sequence well? Do they not, transfer their weight as they're in their forward move? From an approach perspective, like, are they just sitting fastball all the time? Like, and especially with younger guys, like, you try to ask a lot of those questions because, the intent is going to drive them. So if they're always just hunting the fastball all the time and just like launching themselves at the ball, like, that's going to result in issues. Like if they're guessing, like you'll hear the most wild things. Like I'm sure, you coach younger guys, like you ask some younger guys, no matter how talented they are, questions sometimes, and the responses you get are kind of like way out in left field. Like I've had guys come back from, younger guys come back from the plate after, an unsuccessful attempt. Let's say they struck out, and it kind of went against the plan that we were discussing. And, I might kind of joke around and be like, hey, what happened? And because they're young, you'll get that, like, I have no idea. And you're like, all right, like, so I think like context is going to provide a lot of information in terms of like the route you want to go, but also just leveraging the data, leveraging the video, movement data, things like that. So it's going to depend, I think, depending on the individual and like what may be wrong. You could go in a lot of different avenues, but yeah, I mean, things like that, like that's going to happen all the time with younger guys, especially as the competition gets better and better and better and better. The secondary pitches are better. The fastballs are faster. The shapes are better. The execution of those pitches is better. Even with the accuracy issues of Major League Baseball, I think the average miss for a pitcher is it's like 14 or 16 inches. So even at the highest levels, like balls are not always going where they want to go, but the stuff is significantly better.
I still maintain I think baseball is one of the hardest games to play, particularly as a batter. I think it's madness the speed it comes in at, and you've got to react to it and not swing or swing and stuff. What was
Oh, yeah.
really interesting, you
Right.
meant. Sorry, say that again.
No, I was gonna say that's why I try to, especially with the younger guys and even with the older guys, like it is hard. It is phenomenally hard, and I try to minimize what they're doing all the time just to give them the perspective. I was just like, ultimately, like, you're trying to hit a ball with a stick. Like there is a ball moving in different shapes at different speeds, and it's going to be thrown into this imaginary little square, and you have to hit it with a stick. Like that's really hard. And like, I think when you minimize it like that, you kind of make a joke out of it to be light, but I think it brings up to them, at least in my attempt to do it, is to just kind of make them realize like the difficulty of the task at hand. And especially with a lot of these kids that come from, like you were saying, like backgrounds where they're just dominating the people around them. And then they get moved up to a higher level, or now they're in professional baseball, or the people around them are like, the game gets harder as you go up. And it's why like some of the most technically proficient players don't always make it to the big leagues. Like, and mentality and how you deal with failure, like we talked about before with the ego part of it, like you have to have like a bit of an ego to play any level of professional sport, because like the failure rate, especially in baseball and Premier League football, like you're coming up to these academies, like the people that you're surrounding yourself with, you might think one of your teammates is the best player you've ever seen, and they don't make it past, for you guys, like the 12s or the 13s or the 15s or the 17s, they might never make that Premier League roster, or like here, they might never make that big league roster. You might be in AAA that might be as far as your career goes. So you have to have that kind of that ego a little bit, just with how often that you fail, to know that like, a week's worth of horrible, shitty games is not going to define, your skill level of what you're doing.
There's something in that minimalist bit as well, because I do it a lot with my kids in high pressure environments. So if they're going to a game that means something against a really hard opposition, so I don't think anyone would disagree with this. Southampton obviously are a good category one academy, but when you come up against Man United's, Chelsea's, Cities, at times they can be really challenging for the boys. And the terminology I always say to them is just remember, it's a bunch of kids from Manchester with a bunch of white lines and a football. And like you said there, I feel like something that has been really successful for me is being really primitive with it, is describing it in almost like its most basic form that you can. And like, I see the kids almost go, actually, that's a really good point. Like you're not playing against Raheem Sterling or Harry Kane or Mbappe. In your case, you're not playing against Stanton or Otani or Bryce Harper or anything like that. Like you're you're playing a kid in another minor league environment that lives currently in Philadelphia or Washington or wherever that may be. So I think that I don't know what it is, but I think something in that minimalist bit is really interesting because I think it resonates quite well with the players around.
Yeah, and especially with baseball, it's like it's not a it's nothing's in continual motion. Like if you're hitting, you might get 4 plate appearances a game to go up there. Um, and if you fail, the first 3 times, you're sitting on that as you go through the game, and then you wait your kind of turn to go hit again. Whether you're playing in the field, whether you're DHing and you're just in the dugout. And for a lot of younger guys, and even guys at the big league level, like that's hard. Like you can kind of start to snowball into failure can happen a really long time. I can hit the ball 100 miles an hour. I had a kid last year, 2 years ago, when I was in Fayetteville, and I love this kid. He's phenomenally talented, but he went through a stretch in the month of August where he just like had statistically like box score stats. I think he had like 2 hits, and they were both like homers. But in terms of like the batted ball data that he had and the metrics he was putting up, they were phenomenal. They were the best of his entire career. He was just literally hitting the ball at people. And I think that kind of to tie back into what you were talking about before with the metric side of it and the data collection, being able to communicate that with him allowed him to, well, yeah, he's kind of pissed that it keeps happening, but it didn't break him. Like he started laughing at some of these things because he would hit the ball like 105 miles an hour to the wall. The metrics for the batted ball were phenomenal. The expected metrics for those batted balls were phenomenal. But like you had some guy running into a wall to make the catch, or he's just like nuking the ball in a straight line right at somebody standing there. And like, especially with shifts and things like that in the outfield, and this was slightly before, or maybe it was when they banned the infield shifts, but like you can't help that. The randomness of like I'm hitting a ball with a stick at 106, 107 miles an hour, and someone's just standing there. Like, so I think like going back and kind of being able to communicate that data with them, like if he continues to do that over a long period of time, like he was just extremely unlucky for that month, but like that's something that will scale eventually. Like you're just going to hit it at someone who is not standing there. And that's something that like being able to be okay with that makes all the difference in the world, because the perspective of failure versus I did exactly what I was trying to do, it just didn't work out that time. And I think that's something, especially at the younger levels, that I try to push on them, is that like, what is success? If it's simply always getting a hit, you're never going to be happy. And even then, like you can get away with kind of the dinky, I clipped the ball on the side and I flipped it over the shortstop's head. And, did I make good contact? Did I make a good decision? Probably not. So being able to like coach around those ideas, so when that does happen, the kid can laugh and you can be like, all right, I got away with one. Or if you nuke one and you do everything that you make the right decision, you make solid contact, you hit it at the velocities you're looking at, but it's an out. Yeah, you're pissed, but like, that you have done something that was successful. So I think that's where like the data piece of it, and I know I'm jumping back to like previous questions you were saying, like I think that's the side of it that is going to be the biggest part of the development process for these younger guys, is like being able to understand what success looks like in a game where like by every metric you succeed, but the most important one to them, like in terms of like the box score itself, like you don't get.
Oh, to be fair, you answered what my next question was going to be. It was around the failure bit. So you've managed to jump ahead without me saying anything, which is amazing. I guess just around that is, how do you get buy-in from teammates or parents and whatnot? Because, I'd imagine sometimes when parents are, correct me if I'm wrong, are going, we want to see box scores so that they might have a better chance to make that jump to single A, double A, triple A, major leagues and stuff. They might purely focus on the box scores and what's good, what they can tell their friends and family of an evening. how do you get them to focus on more the process and actually understand that, listen, he's actually doing everything right, just needs to keep doing what he's doing, and eventually the trend will suggest that it's going to be an upward trajectory. Or the other way, where you're having success now, but we're telling you failure is going to come. You've got to accept that unless we make some adaptations, it's going to drop off because you're not going to be able to sustain, hitting a homer every two at bat. It just isn't going to be sustainable. No one can do it. So yeah, how do you get buy-in from, I guess, teammates for one? Is that a little bit easier, and then friends and family and stuff? Secondly,
Um, to jump on the last part about that first, I think like you're looking at, I made the goal, for me particularly, I made the goal specific metrics that were around the batted ball profile of what we deem successful, not the outcome. So like, it was like that kid going back to a couple of years ago, like he was doing everything barrel in the baseball. There's a metric called barrels, which is basically high end velocity within a specific launch angle window. The harder you hit it, the bigger the window. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. It's very indicative of the carryover from year to year is very indicative of talent. So like, if you're doing those things, like you're going to be successful. Like, yes, you might run into some bad luck, but in terms of expected statistics, just like the XG model or X assist model for football, like these are things that while you may have only scored 5 goals, your XG says like 15. So we know that you're doing all the right things, just things are not happening the way they should. Because at the end of the day, like just like football, like there is some luck involved. There's some randomness of things that are happening. So in that aspect of it, like being able to look at particular things that are indicative of future and long-term success is the biggest thing. And that's what I try to focus on. Like, yes, we're celebrating the homers. Like you're celebrating all those things because, they're achieving what you want to achieve. When you get away with something stupid, we're still going to celebrate it anyway because they're young. And like this, who's to say their career only lasts another year or 2 years or 3 years? So it's like you're working for the short term and the long term. Mostly the long term with the level that I'm at, but at the same time, like you have to have them enjoy and celebrate those wins in the immediate, because like you're going to lose the future buy-in if you don't. There was at one part of the season, I bought a giant orange cowboy hat, and that was our home run thing. Was every time they hit a home run, they got to wear this, like it was like a 25, I don't know what it was, like the gallon, like cowboy hats. It's this massive foam hat. And that was just something dumb to just like, because at the end of the day, like these guys, no matter how much money they have, like they're 18, 19 years old, like 20, 21, like they're high school, college kids. And no matter and there are some of them that I certainly believe are going to be big leaguers within the next few years, they're still doing something extremely hard. So celebrating those short-term wins with the eye towards long-term goals is going to be huge, and it's going to achieve that buy-in. And then to hop into like the first part of your question, I am lucky enough that I do not have to deal with parents. In professional baseball, I don't deal with any of that. Like I was the director of a sports nonprofit in the kind of greater DC area. So I had that experience where I was involved with parents. I'm thankful to not be involved with parents anymore. And that's not to say that there weren't some great ones, but there are certainly some parents that I love talking to and had the right idea and were bought in. But that's probably one of the more difficult things if you have to deal with that on the within a pro organization, is the expectations of parents for their kids. Because it's like we talked about kind of before we hopped on the call, is that like, and rightfully so, every parent wants what's best for their kid. They think the world of their kid. Some are just slightly more delusional than others, but especially with you dealing with guys that are like that young, like if you have ideas of grandeur where it's like, all right, my 7-year-old is going to be the next David Beckham. But then again, like David Beckham's father was like that too. So,
listen, I'm a San Antonio Spurs fan, so what I'm about to say isn't leveled in a little bit of bitterness, but at least you don't have to deal with Kawhi Leonard's old man, like apparently San Antonio had to. Yeah, because that caused some problems when he forced his way out to Toronto. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. One thing I'm trying to get better at is actually how can we get them as part of the team. So rather than having that dynamic of like you bring your child and we're going to work with them and we're going to set some homework which they're going to do. It's like actually we're in this as a three really. So what can we be held accountable for? What can you put on us as a coaching staff, as an organization? What can the child be accountable for? What are we going to put on them? What are we going to challenge them with? And then equally, what is the parent accountable for? What are they going to think? And even if it is, I'm going to film them for 10 minutes practicing in the back garden. It gets you as a team rather than an us and them. So that's something that I think longer term can definitely help in that space. And what you mentioned around the using statistics to change the success criteria, I think is a really nice one. And that's something that actually I'm going to reflect on from the back of this call, which is, when working with those older age groups, removing like your XGs and all the obvious stuff, is there group specific success criterias that we can have that are linking to our IDP targets or our values as a group? So if it's number of regains in the final third or number of block shots or something like that, whatever we want it to be, but actually just shifting what success looks like, just so that there's accountability towards the process, but also their understanding that we value that at all times, and that the development piece for us is always going to be prominent because we're getting statistics that can back up what we're asking you to do.
Yeah, and I think like and that's like a big question too, like with I think most organizations in pro ball are asking themselves is that what what is the directive of the minor leagues, especially at those lower levels? Like, are you developing to win or are you developing by winning? Like, there are certain organizations that will just be like, we have to win every single game, and that's how we're going to develop in our process of trying to win. And then there are teams that just go, all right, we're looking to develop, and that if we win, it's going to be a byproduct of that development, which are kind of slightly two different things because it depends on what you value. And for me, the success that I've had here, I think that's something where we focus on like, sure, we're trying to win. Like, because if you don't, like, it's professional baseball. Like, you don't want it to be treated like a rec league, but at the same time, like, it is not the end all be all. It is like, we know what we're looking to do, and we're looking to build skills that scale so that they can have future success when they get called up. So that kind of developing leading into wins is something that, that I've had success with here. I mean, there are other organizations like the Tampa Bay Rays, I'm pretty sure, are like they play to win, and it's, they're going to do everything they can to win, and that's how they're going to develop through that. The Yankees and the Dodgers win a huge amount of games at the minor league levels. And, I'm not going to speak to the directives they had, because I don't know. But, they've also had some phenomenal people in there. I know Dylan Lawson was the director of hitting for the Yankees for a long time, and all those young rookies that are coming up went through him. So like whatever they were doing, a lot of success there. So it depends on the org itself, but like, I think that brings up a good point where it's just kind of like, what are you using to achieve those goals? And like, what is the ultimate directive of like the lower levels? Like, are you developing, and that is all that matters? And if you just win, you win. But at a certain point, like, if you don't win enough games, you're going to start to lose interest in the players you have. So they all kind of just feed off each other. Like, if you're winning at all costs and you're not developing, that doesn't work. If all you're doing is developing, but you just happen to not really win games because you're not taking that next step after training and putting in-game kind of atmosphere, then you're going to like lose them. So it's like a weird, you got to figure out what the medium is. But
Yeah, no,
the parent thing, like, you're spot on. I mean, it's easier to have them be part of the equation than to boot them out. I mean, like, they're spending more time at home than they are with you. So if you don't have them on board, like, you want to make sure the things that you're working towards are universal in what these kids are doing versus like only when they're with you, and then they go off and go do something else.
No, that development winning piece is a fascinating one, and it's one that we have over here all the time. It's like, actually, do you develop winners, or do we develop skills that hopefully help them win? And what does that look like in each environment? And for me, it links back around to what the questions I was asking at the start, a little bit around talent ID as well, because I think some kids and players will thrive in the win at all costs at all time environment, and actually that's how they'll develop, because they can link it to the why, which is to win. And you can say to them, listen, you need to put extra hours in going and focusing on this pitch because that's going to help us win. And they'll go and do it. Whereas there'll be other kids that need the space to go and practice without the pressure of winning so that they've got the skill which they perceive nailed before they then have to worry about the winning piece, and they want the space to be able to do that. So for me, I think it's all about getting the right players in the right environment to allow them to flourish rather than going one's better than the other. I think it's just
Yeah.
getting people that are suitable for it. I'm conscious of time, so a couple more questions. Last one, really on this before I go for a personal one, which is um, looking forward into current trends in baseball. What do you think the next gold standard piece of development work might be within the baseball space? Obviously, been a lot of transition, as we mentioned, over a 10, 15, 20-year period. Is there anything you think's on the horizon that will really aid players in their development from what you've heard about, what you've seen, or where you just think a little crevice might open up that people might begin to explore?
I mean, I can't. Certain things I won't
I was gonna
say.
say, don't stitch yourself up here. Don't do anything maybe that
Yeah, no,
Houston
no.
are doing. But
Certain things, because I work for an organization. There's certain things that I'm, obviously can't give out the secret sauce. But no, I think it's like that idea that once certain teams got into the data driven aspect of development, it's spread, and they're seeing the value in measuring these things in order to get baselines, to shorten the feedback loop, to develop players. So I think that's only going to get more details, obviously, as things move up, and especially with Hawkeye, that Major League Baseball's inputted in kind of every stadium at the major league level, and then teams have it at the minor league level, and being able to get these data points from the batted ball data to the spin data on pitches to the biomechanics data on the field. So I mean, like, having access to more is going to lead to that one team finding that thing and exploiting it for the year or two you maybe have before everybody catches up. I mean, I remember when Houston, got into the spin efficiency, high spin rate fastballs at the top of the zone. You had guys like Verlander and Garrett Cole when they were here having huge amount of success, and then everybody started to catch up. So it's like the window for advantage in professional baseball, and I don't know if it's like this in the Premier League, is pretty short. Like, it's a copycat league. It's why it's why you can't really like throw out like any wild theories when you work for a pro ball team, because like every team's looking for that next edge before everybody else catches up. So whether it's on the pitching end, the hitting end, the fielding end, the base running, everybody got really onto this vault stealing thing, which is essentially like, just have that stationary position. But then again, like, the bases were bigger. Like, they're trying to figure out how to take advantage of the pitch clock. And so every team is looking for that next thing. But on the hitting end, for what I will say, I mean, I think that like having access to that more information is going to open up a lot more doors to looking for the next big thing that you're trying to exploit in order to either drive success at the major league level or drive, development at the lower levels in order to create more player value and to create those guys at the top level.
I got told at 18 the best coaches are the best thieves. So for me, I think you're spot on there. Go and steal what someone else is doing, adapt it slightly, and use it as your own. And then last question for me, which is, if I were to speak to any of the players that you work with, how would you hope they described you in 3 words?
I don't know if it's 3 words. I think when you asked me this question the last time, I think I didn't even know how to answer. I would just hope that they recognize the amount of effort that's put in, the dedication that's put in, and the goal into making them successful. For me, I will be all in on the players, and no matter what their signing bonus is or their level within the organization, I've tried to go above and beyond to make sure that each of these guys not just receives the same value of coaching, but like my job is to make the players better. It's not individual players. It's not just this guy. It's, my job is to make them better. outside of that, like I can't be concerned with anything else. And that's one thing that I hope that the players recognize, as well as the fact that, I'm always available to them. I told them, I said, if you ask for extra work, the only time I'm ever going to say no is if I feel like it's kind of a workload issue. I'm always willing to have those conversations with them and be honest with them, and especially those older players, but also the younger players, because making sure that they're educated in the meaning behind the metrics, the goals that they have, that they understand, because it is their career. Kind of making sure that they're empowered to say no if they don't agree with something, but also be educated in the sense when in the off season, if they're off on their own, they know that they have an understanding of what they need to do, why they need to do it, and they can kind of take that next step in maturity and have a real hand in their own development when, I'm not kind of standing next to them, kind of deal.
100%. It's their journey, and we're just a little bit on it. But yeah, Andrew, listen, really good conversation. I think we've been going for about an hour 45-ish now, hour and a half. So granted, some of it's been filmed, the other bit is just for us. But yeah,
Okay.
really appreciate your time, and we'll definitely stay in contact.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Initiative podcast with me, Michael Wright. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at the Sports Initiative Podcast, and share this podcast with friends and family. I'll see you next week.